The art of screen printing.
Hey everybody, it's Lon Winters and Corey Gray with Graphic Elephants, and this is the Art of Screen Printing presented by GSG. How's it going, Corey?
Good.
Awesome, awesome. Hey, we're going to continue with our blue elements and move to the background and start, I think, as you put it, work from the back forward. Corey, set us up.
A little bit of leftover from last video. I want to make sure that we all understand that the white plate that we created for the GSG highlight here, it needs to be knocked out of your blue. So making a selection of that white and going to your blue plate, go ahead and just delete that information out, just so that way your whites stay hot and when it prints, and that way you're not interfering with the blue at all. Okay. All right. And then from there, we're going to go into the mesh that we saw that we created originally for the background. What's great about the blue mesh is that it's only a single color. It doesn't require a base at all. And if you remember the pattern here, it was just these tiles out of Illustrator that we had grabbed. And they are very muted, so we're going to kind of stay with that. Now, going back over to our breakdowns, we can see that the red's probably too dark. The green and the blue are pretty comparable, but I'm looking for something that has the best contrast. The blue has it, so I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of that. Remember, make copies of all your mode breakdowns. Do not use the original. To get this information positive and this area negative, I'm going to inverse the image. So now we only have the mesh that we're dealing with here. And you can see that it's in a half-tone situation. I want to bring a new player onto the field. It's the info palette. The info palette is very important with what we do for preparation because we need to know what percentage these half-tone dots are going to output at. It's hard to tell when it's continuous tone on a screen, but we don't have that ability in screen printing. We have to have a half-tone dot. So if you roll over your cursor in any of these values, over here in the info palette, under the left side where it says K, it's going to tell you exactly the percentage. Right now we've got about 27% here. I'm going to bump that up a little bit, and I'm going to use the black lever on the input levels, and you're going to kind of see it get a little darker, but not much. I don't want, because we want this to fall back on the shirt. We talked about how the base is removed and the color falls back. This is the same idea, only this time we're not going to base it. We want it to fall back, and we're going to keep it as a halftone. I'm going to make a blue spot channel here. We're going to keep it as a halftone so that it falls back as it's supposed to. It will not compete with anything else in the foreground. I'm going to say blue on that. I'm going to turn my fabric on. And I'm going to change the solidification here. I'm going to go down to actually 10% because when this thing prints as a halftone without a base on black, it falls back fast. So now we can look at those two things together. Now, in our original one, I also had a highlight. If you remember, I had a highlight moving through these tiles. Okay, so that's the beauty of having these on a layer. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, turn this on. I'm going to make a selection of just the highlight. And what I want to do is I'm going to bump it up so I have a little bit more showing in the blue. I'm going to use the levels. I'm going to go to our black input, and I'm going to push it up as far as I can go. You can see how that's changing. I'm not getting quite what I want, so I'm going to do levels again, use that black input level. I'm going to move it over, say OK. And now let's go ahead and turn the fabric back on and now look at it. And you can see that there is a little more opacity to our blue in these top parts of the tile. And over here, it kind of remains the same. And all this is going to do is when it prints down on our black fabric, is it's all going to mute. Even though this is 25% versus 100, this is going to mute perfectly for what we want. And remember, working on a black shirt will give you this, or a navy shirt. A dark colored garment will have this effect work well for you. On light colored shirts, it will not. But just bear that in mind when you're doing your separation process on darks, is that colors will fall back, but not so far back that you can't use them as secondary tones. Okay, so here's our burst, again, on its own layer, like we like things. And as we did all of our other ones, we have to go over here to our breakdown mode. The blue was the best contrast. So I clicked and I drug it down, making that copy because we always want to work with a copy. And then, of course, same thing, white. Remember, white is clear. It's not noticeable information to your RIP software, so we need to have this inverted. So Command-I will give us a complete inversion of the information. Now we have this big dark star. And of course, most of this information will be gone because we're looking at our original over here. We can see that the rings in the mesh cover quite a bit of that up. So we need to delete that information. So I'm going to go back up to RGB, and Because things are on their own layers, I can go to my mesh layer and make a selection of it. And you can see the shape here of all the mesh. I'm going to go over to my extracted information, and I'm just going to delete it out. And then, of course, we still have the rings in here as well. So I'm going to turn my rings back on so I can make a selection of them. And I've got a few here, so I have to make a few different selections, but they're all on their own layers. So it's pretty easy to do. Now, when I've selected all the rings together, you can see there's a full selection here of all the rings as one mass. If I go back over to the burst and I hit delete, it's gone. So now all that information that we had in the middle is now gone as it should. I'm going to make a selection of this extracted information. I made a blue burst channel for our separation. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to disregard the information that we used from the blue copy. And then let's go ahead and take a look at that. And now you can see there's the burst with its deleted information. I'm going to bring it down to like 20% here because this is an area we want faded. Okay, so we already have halftones working for us that you can see. If I zoom up here, you can see that these are about 24%, 55%. So there's some of this is going to really fade just like we want it to do. But I do want some of the areas that we're seeing here that are more dense, like these bands here and a few here. I want a little bit of base underneath those. So I'm going to make a selection of the blue burst, and I'm going to contract it 2 pixels like we have everything else. Let's say okay, contract, and then okay. I'm going to go to my white channel, white printer channel. I'm going to make that information there. You can see it's pretty dense as it is on the burst itself. I'm going to push all that back, so I only have a little bit showing. I'm going to use the levels. I'm going to use the white lever tool. I'm going to really blow a lot of that information out. You can see it disappearing pretty quickly. I'm going to use that middle lever. I'm going to soften some of that a little bit more. And then with my output levels, even go a little softer. I don't want a lot of base here, just enough to kiss it so the blue stays a little bit bright. So I'm going to turn my fabric back on. Let's turn that burst back on. And now let's go ahead and zoom up. And because of that change in transparency, you can see there's a nice hot blue going on here. But some of these areas in here are fading exactly as we need them to, just like they are in our original color image. So be mindful of how much base is showing under a halftone base because you don't want any kind of peakage.
Brilliant, Corey. That really does give you the highs and lows, even with just the background, because that little bit of subtle white really pushes some of that forward. And then that hot blue still has enough opacity that you get some meat with it back there too. So he's Corey, Alon. We are Graphic Elephants, and this is the art of screen printing presented by GSG. We'll see you next time.
Next time.